we do believe that life sentences are very appropriate for this kind of assault on a child. And we have to acknowledge that over the last year, we've had many serious assaults on children, sexual assaults and physical assaults. And it is important that we do not fail to react to these with horror and with very strong messages that this kind of behavior is totally, totally unacceptable. We have a similar case in Durban at the moment. We've had similar cases in the Western Cape. We really do need to send messages out to communities that the abuse of children will simply not be tolerated.
Joan, on the one hand, the family talks about this chapter of their lives closing. On the other hand, they're left with this little girl who's psychologically stunted from the trauma, who's physically damaged from it too. Just what sort of rehabilitation is available to a child from a poor home like the home she comes from?
It's an incredibly difficult situation because therapeutic services, from a health point of view, are often prioritized for the child. And this child has long-term physical difficulties. But apart from that, there is the psychological impact of the abuse on the child. And that will also remain with the child for the rest of her life. And therapeutic, psychosocial care of these children is an enormous challenge because it's not adequately funded, and in some parts of the country it's not funded at all. We at Childline are very challenged in our provision of this kind of service to children. At the moment, we are unable to get services like this out into rural areas. We're partnering with the National Association of Child and Youth Care Workers and trying to bring rural children into urban areas in order to have intensive weeks of treatment in order to ameliorate the psychological impact. But our resources are insufficient, and these children suffer enormous psychosocial distress after an assault like this, as do other members in the family. We have actually discovered that it's not just enough to treat the child. You've often got to treat the caregivers of that child because they are also catapulted into a state of crisis by the assault on the child. So we need to work with them because they provide the context in which the child has to begin healing.
Joan, once again, we laud the judge for handing down a sentence like this and sending out such a strong message to potential rapists and attackers of children, really. But we come back to the issue of prevention all the time. And is enough being done to prevent these kinds of attacks on children?
Absolutely not. And this is where I believe the country is failing. Our National Department of Social Development has actually been quite forward-looking on the issue of prevention and early intervention in order to stop these assaults on children and many other forms of abuse and neglect on children in terms of policy and legislation development. But there it seems to stop. The implementation of prevention programs is quite a complex issue. And what we often see is knee-jerk responses to bad assaults on children like this, where we'll have maybe ministers speaking out saying, this must stop, we must do something to stop it. But we do not sit together in the child protection field with government, all sectors involved, and draw up what I would call a comprehensive protection plan and prevention plan in which we look at prevention in every context, the home, the school, the community, and primary, secondary, and tertiary prevention. And until we do that, our prevention efforts are very piecemeal. And because they're piecemeal and we're not putting the whole jigsaw puzzle of prevention together, we are not effectively preventing this kind of assault on children. We also need to encourage our politicians to think of solutions in the long term. What we are dealing with, the high levels of violence in this country, are not going to be resolved within one single political term of office. We've got to think across the lifetime of children and across the lifetime of parenting, because the situation is so serious in this country that there are certainly not going to be any short gap solutions that are going to solve the problem in the immediate future. So we've got to think of child development and have a long-term view of this in order to prevent effectively. We've also got to look at evidence-based programs and not programs that to our adult logic seem to be sensible for children. We've got to look at those programs that have a clear evidence base of being effective.
You deserve to know more.
eNCA.com